welcome to another episode of Change Leadership Conversations. Today I have with me Danielle Tasson. She is the practice lead and director for people, culture, and change at CGI Consulting. I was going to say at the CGI Consulting, but all the same. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Always good to have a friend of the change leadership be part of discussions in terms of what we're doing. So thank you for agreeing to be part of this today. It was really important for us to have someone like you on today's conversation, just because of what it is that you do for CGI. You manage the people change practice side of things, and
absolutely,
you've definitely been seeing a lot of changes, I'm sure. So tell us.
Tell
us about some of those changes that you've been seeing around.
So I think we can say by now that's all an understatement. When we say this, we've got a lot of changes, and I'm sure everyone who ends up watching this is really feeling that. The biggest changes have just been coming from people all of a sudden working remotely. We've got all of these organizations that are so used to having people working side by side and have put in so many strategies around that. So making areas where they work or floors that they work on more open spaced and agile friendly. And now you've got a distributed workforce. And so there's so many changes that come from that as well. Even every day, there seems to be such rapid change that's coming out of the policies that are being released. And so every day, organizations are having to spend time, go through those policies, figure it out what they need to do, how this affects them, how they're going to be able to manage through this. And by the next day, that policy has changed. And so it's
responding quick, fast to change.
Exactly. And so we're seeing a lot of organizations sort of on both sides and really focusing on, well, how do I help support my workforce through this transition? What are some key things that we really need to do right now to make sure that they're happy and healthy and able to stay motivated? Because I think, I guess we're in week 4 now of, most people, if they have the opportunity to staying home and working from home. So how do we make sure that we manage through that? And then how do I grapple with managing my business through these really quick and rapid changes that are coming through? So, a good example is a lot of financial institutions right now are helping individuals defer their mortgage payments. So what can we do to help speed up that process and help our people manage through that process and release some of the pressure that's happening on our call center so that we can manage this, because it's such an influx that nobody's had to really deal with before. So I think, there's big changes all around. There's even the small changes, things like there's so many people who are at home now and their children are at home with them. And so how do we move from, say, a 9 to 5 sort of structure in our day into working maybe 24 hours around the clock, or you feel like that pressure? And how do we make sure people understand how to balance that work life and we're able to be as flexible as we can to our workforce and work around the constraints that they're facing from being at home, right? Yeah. So I think big and small, right?
With some of the changes you've been seeing, or not just seeing, but changes that you've been supporting your clients with and your observations, which have been the organizations that have been more prepared to respond to this type of change? Nobody could have seen this pandemic coming and the COVID and coronavirus and all the disruption it's brought to us. But which were the organizations that were more prepared? What was the defining factor, of the differentiating factor between the various types of organizations?
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think for the past couple of years, even with the change leadership and at your conferences, we've been talking quite a bit about the future of work, right? And what that means, automation and AI and some of those elements that are coming, and we're seeing them come down the road. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of the practices that would have resulted from accelerating those pieces are starting to come into place now. So things like the distributed workforce, there's not as many people at work. They're working in different locations because they don't need to be there. That's an element of a changing workforce that may have been brought about by future of work practices. So the biggest difference I'm seeing is the organizations who had spent a little bit of time and accelerated on their path towards what the future of work would look like at their organization are a little bit more prepared to deal with what's coming down the pipeline. Also, other organizations, the smaller ones tend to be a little bit more flexible, but the bigger organizations that we've been working with, there's a lot of infrastructure issues or areas that haven't necessarily been focused on in the past or tend to take a little bit longer to upgrade that are now causing some issues, right? And so those are just some of the big ones that are really seem to be sticking with people right now. And I think people are really focusing on just getting over the hurdle of how do we stay productive working at home, right? How do we make sure people can access all the things they need to access? Can, email at the right times? How do we manage the issues that we might be facing from some of the infrastructure and technology tools that we had in place before so that we can move forward through them? So long-winded answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
Not at all. You raised the interesting topic around future of work. Mm-hmm. And a big aspect of future of work is flexible workplaces, not just flexible working, but workplaces. But let's dig in a little bit into future of work. That's a terminology that is being thrown around everywhere.
Yeah.
Somebody listening to us right now has heard that term future of work.
Absolutely.
But let's talk a little bit about future of work. What does that really mean?
So when I think about it, and the way that I define it is really in three sort of areas. I think about the changing workforce. Mm-hmm. So your individuals who are at your organization, how are they going to work differently in the future? When we think about one way that's accelerated is, well, they're not working in the same place right now. Mm-hmm. So that's a good example of what would fall in that bucket. I also think about accelerated automation, accelerated artificial intelligence tools, accelerated working practices, right? Or working processes. So how are those changing? How are they becoming more rapid? What tools or technology pieces are putting in place so that it frees up the time of your changing workforce? And how are they having to work differently that way? And then the third area is really on those fundamental technology, things like collaboration tools to help enable your workforce and help enable your organized work together, but also things like cybersecurity, ethics, and data privacy, all of those fundamental technology areas that will need to be revisited and either retooled or, changed in a certain way to be able to support this new way of working.
Okay.
And so I think there's elements in each of those that tend to be changing very quickly, or some that are being put on the back burner that because of COVID and because of what we're going through right now, people have had to think about, and they've had to think about in ways that they haven't really needed to think about before. So even things like automation and working processes and things like that. For a long time, a lot of organizations had many checks and balances in place when, say, putting together a new project or deciding they want to automate a new process, and let's say they buy a chatbot or something like that. And now a process that may have taken 3 months or 4 months because they had all these different checks that they had to go through. Spoken with different individuals who were like, wow, we did that in 2 days. and we've had this held up for so long, right?
Exactly. So it really begs to say, what processes do we have that is hindering change? It's hindering the introduction of change. When we feel we have the option to change, we take our time, we dilly-dally about it. But once we do not have options, then we just speed the whole process. And they say change is happening at a faster speed than we can imagine. We keep on using the term future of work. Post-pandemic, is there something like the future of work, or is the future of work now?
I think it's now. I think it's now. When we think about, for so long we've been saying it's coming. And I think the changes from this crisis that have happened to our workforce are so large, so much larger than us just working from home. And I think the big trigger that would make me say that it's now is the fact that I don't think all of these changes are going to go away. Mm-mm. I don't think we're just going to go back to work and everything goes back to normal. And we're all back in our desks. I think people are recognizing the efficiencies that they're gaining from working from home. I think people are recognizing that flexibility can be a good thing, and it can actually make you more productive, or it might be a bad thing, and we need to put policies around that. And I think people are making decisions now that will enable some of those things to continue in the future. And for me, that would mean enough, right?
Yeah. One thing that is sad to see, and hopefully I don't see much of it post pandemic, is are there going to be those organizations that don't make it past the pandemic? Let's talk about retail industry as an example. Some of the retail organizations were suffering. The malls, going to shopping malls was something that people were still struggling with the concept. Do we still need to go shopping? Can we do this online? And with all of this pandemic happening now, it's really shifted people to the online side of things. More people have become familiar. As an example, I did not like grocery shopping online. I just didn't like grocery shopping. I wanted to go into the store, look at what I'm buying, feel my fruits and vegetables before I bought them. But with this, I'm automatically doing groceries online.
Yeah.
I did Amazon, I did the Zara, I did some of the other stores, but just grocery shopping was something that I wasn't doing online.
Me too. It's interesting how quickly we can switch, right? It's very interesting.
And so what's going to happen to those organizations who did not even have an online strategy? I was surprised to see some organizations that do not have an online platform where people can buy from. Are those organizations going to be able to even survive post the pandemic? Especially when we talk about the future is now, and only those organizations who may have prepared for it or were thinking about it. What happens?
So I think now is a unique opportunity for all organizations to stop and reflect a little bit. And,
I like that.
I don't necessarily want to put my finger down and say, anyone who hasn't thought of the future of work, their organization is going to crash. I think organizations now have an opportunity to stop and reflect and decide what are some of those changes that they're able to adopt now? What are some of those barriers that might be preventing them from doing that? And is now the time to really focus on it? I think now is the time for organizations to put that plan in place. I don't think it's too late, but I do think it's important that we look on the side of the organizations that do put it in place and do think through those things and spend some time putting together what that strategy looks like are probably going to have a stronger chance of not having such an impact. I always use the example of in the crash in 2008, Uber was one of the organizations that grew out of that.
Yeah.
So,
but they didn't have much to lose, though. They were starting out as opposed to...
Absolutely.
There's organizations who start in a time of crisis, and they're those organizations who have to survive and flourish past the crisis.
Absolutely.
There's some where the crisis really tests their resiliency.
Yeah. Yes. I think I can say all organizations are being tested right now. And it's about finding those pieces that you can focus on now, but not losing sight of the pieces that you should focus on later. One of the things I've spoken about quite a bit too is any of the strategies that you're putting in place now, unless they're, immediate relief or it's something that's going to completely crash your organization or something like that, step back and think about, do I need this now? Will I need this in 6 months? Am I putting in the right strategy so that in 6 months from now, we'll still be able to expand on what this looks like?
Exactly. Because as a change leader, that's one of the key characteristics where you're visionary. You're not just thinking in the moment, you're thinking 2 steps, 3 steps, 5 steps ahead, and you're looking at the whole big picture. Because you say something which seems like contradicting ourselves, because we're like, you have to respond to the change right now, but you have to also pause and reflect. So it's finding that balance where, yes, we're responding to the situation we're facing now, but at the same time, we have to be thinking, what does this mean for us 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line?
Exactly. Yeah. I think even now too, I guess we're 4 weeks in, or 4 weeks in some of the 5 weeks.
At least in Canada.
I'm used to it. Yeah, I'm used to it now.
Canada, I think we're in our 5th week going in. I may be wrong, but we're all losing track right now.
I know. I'm minimizing it. I'm just remembering some time in quarantine.
By the time we add this video, this recording will probably be more than a few weeks in. We'll probably be about content of anybody who is listening,
Absolutely.
by the time you get to listen to this, we will be quite a few weeks in.
Yeah. So what that tells me too is we're kind of over the shock. I think it's the first couple of weeks, everyone's going through their own emotions of change, and everyone's going through that change curve, including all these organization leaders, including, our government leaders, including everyone on a personal level and on a business level as well. And so I think we've gone through that shock. We've kind of dipped down into that area of thinking maybe this is going to be temporary. And now we're recognizing that this is going to be a longer term strategy for us as a society. So we need to also apply that same sort of thinking to our organization, right? Any of the activities that you're planning to do today, we're past the ones that are, we need to do this right away and make sure we survive. I think we're sort of, or, hopefully at the edge of those, or you're kind of over that mentally. So now what are you going to put in place to change the way that you work and the ways of working and, the tools that you use, so that in this new environment, you can grow and expand. And I think everyone has the opportunity to do that. All organizations have the opportunity to do that. Now's the time to really spend that time reflecting, and don't just be reactionary in the way that you choose your actions. We're past reactionary. Let's focus on what we can do now to stay relevant and advance and grow in the future.
Yeah, there's the option to react, there's the option to be proactive, and there's the option to respond. And I'd say the best organizations are the ones who are proactive and the ones who are responding, the best leaders. And however, even those organizations that are proactive and responding, they might be sometimes that they have to react.
Absolutely.
But the more you're able to prepare to lead and respond to change, the more able you are to ride the tide of it, and not just ride the tide of it, right above the tide.
And I think, the key skill of being flexible doesn't just apply to your workforce, but it also should apply to your business. There's going to be things that you decide today, and then all of a sudden a new policy comes out, or there's been another change in the way society is handling some of these things. And it's okay to pivot.
Yeah.
You don't always have to stick on the same road that you've decided. I think the way that we're accelerating ways of working and processes, and I talked about this example of, something that took 3 months took 2 days, you can apply that to the decisions that you have to make, and no work is lost by figuring these things out. Everyone's figuring it out. There's really going to be no right or wrong through the way that we get through this.
And that's what I like about what's coming out of this whole situation, is that we're doing it together.
Yes.
We're doing it together. And we all have the opportunity to fail forward together.
Absolutely.
And we all realizing there's no right way of doing this, because this is totally new to us.
Absolutely.
We may have had some pandemics or crises like the SARS, but this one just takes the biscuit.
Absolutely. And I know ProSci has been speaking about agile change management, and one of the principles or one of the learnings from agile change management is failing fast. Right? Not waiting until the end for you to have everything put together before you're going out and launching things. You can apply that same thing to anything that you're doing, and any of the decisions that you're making or strategies that you're putting in place to manage through that. It's okay to fail fast, and think about another way to move forward through this. So even with there's so many ways that we can think about a crisis like this negatively, even with different organizations, and, talking about, well, will they, fail or will they end up not being here in the next environment? Well, instead we could flip that around and say, well, what are our opportunities so that we can be even stronger when this is over? Exactly. And I think having that really strong focus and going out and testing what you think is going to work or not is going to be a key piece of the puzzle for you to move forward and grow throughout this.
Yeah, I like that. And it speaks to me in a different way, or more personally, when I even think about the change leadership as an organization. So sharing a more personal story is, even with this change leadership conversations we're doing, having to be on videos and record this and be agile about it. So when you say something like failing fast, failing forward, we don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know if it's going to be perfect. We don't have all the tools in place. But there's something I keep saying to people: done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Most times you want to have it perfect. And that's why we go through all of these processes in our organization, where you have to go through step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's where agile is a little bit more different. It's about doing it and learning as you go along and getting better in the process. And that's what we've had to do at the Change Leadership. This really affected our business model, and we had to pivot very quickly and see how can we offer value to our audiences, to our Change Leadership community, to the people who come to our events. And they're not going to have that opportunity in May. And we've had to cancel some master classes. But it's about just going out there, testing the waters and doing it. And it's really made us bring that strategy forward.
Yeah.
The good thing
is, and exactly. And that's a positive. That's a positive. It's such a different way of thinking and moving forward through something. And look at how quickly you're able to put these things together when you're not focusing on everything being absolutely what it should be.
Try not to focus on everything being perfect. And just trying to get it out there and saying, let's test it, because the more we do it, the more we'll get better at it. And I'm sure anybody who's had the opportunity to see the whole webcast series will see our learning curve in making it happen. But what's awesome about it is that they are part of our community, and we're doing this together and we're learning together. Again, what we said earlier, there's an opportunity for all of us to do this together. Mm-hmm. And I believe the society right now, or people are more forgiving of not wanting perfect, because everybody acknowledges that we're going through unprecedented times. We're going through uncertain times. So there's that element of people being more forgiving about things, not having to have that perfect process. The only time I feel they're not forgiven is when there's a lack of people-centeredness.
I agree.
When it doesn't show that there's a human side to what you're doing, then they're not very forgiving.
I agree with you. And I think, one of the biggest learnings for me too is, I work in change, and I work with people, and I think sometimes I forget that people are going through this change themselves, and they're going through, or they're not always used to working in this sort of agile way, or thinking about failing fast, or not worrying about things being perfect. And just as in any other strategy that you're going through or plan that you're going through with change, and you have to give individuals the time to go through their feelings about change and help bring them along. It's the same thing of people recognizing things don't need to be perfect right now, or you have to help create that safe space, that safe environment for people to know. And that's much harder when you're at home, right? It's much harder to, you have to connect in different ways, and you have to find innovative ways that you can do that. And different ways that even me, I'm so used to being in my office and seeing people all the time. And now I've had to learn and take a step back and be reflective of how can I make sure that I'm more present for my team, and how can I make sure that I'm more present for my colleagues and for my clients and things like that as well. So it really is such a big change for all of us individually. And it's something that we all need to keep top of mind.
Okay. Give us one final thought for somebody listening now. What would be that one thing you want them to take out of this? When I say this, the whole of the COVID crisis, all of the...
Don't be scared.
I like
Don't
that.
Be scared. I think a lot of people are going through feelings of anxiety and worry. And I think a lot of people are, there's right reasons, right? Things are changing very quickly, and things are changing in different ways. But when, it's that sort of old saying, when one door closes, another door opens. I think all of this can be thought of as an opportunity, both on an individual level and at an organization level. All of this can be thought about as a positive. And when things change one way, you can take the opportunity to focus on growth in another way. So try your best to focus on things that make you happy right now. Don't worry about things being perfect. Try not to get too scared, and just remember, when one door closes, another one opens, and get outside if you can. Obviously social distance, but the sun helps. Sit outside on your porch.
Yeah,
Just
the weather is being helpful a little bit these days. And I'm already connected to you. If there's somebody out there who wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
I'm always open to connect. I'm on LinkedIn. I have an open profile, so you can find me there as well. If not, you can shoot me an email. My email is danielle.tasson@cgi.com. But the best way is probably through LinkedIn. I do my best to be on there and answer as many people as I can. So I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear some of the strategies that you're doing at your organization, what you're feeling personally through this, what's working, what's not. And I think we can all connect together and grow together through this. So I would love to hear from you.
That sounds really good. Danielle, I'm excited to connect with you again pretty soon because we're doing a masterclass together. Once all of this pandemic is over, we're doing a masterclass with CGI. So fingers crossed this whole crisis soon. And we can make that happen. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.